I will get started introducing our two stars for today's show, because together these two are responsible for making decisions that impact millions of people around the web.
Yeesh.
On the left, I think, for viewers as well, on the right, we will see Mr. Jono Alderson, who was elected to the AMP Advisory Committee late last year, who can read the matrix and works on everything technical SEO at Yoast. And while deemed impossible by many, he claims his CSS skills are even better than his SEO skills.
It's true.
And on the left, we have Mr. Joost Valk, the legendary founder of a company called Yoast. And Yoast is a kid of the internet. And when the internet came to the Netherlands, Yoast went online and he never went offline. He combined his early age passion for building websites with mad skills in digital marketing and thus became a leading SEO expert. And besides being the unofficial face of Musculori, the shoe brand, Yoast spends most of his time leading the product team at Yoast. So please put your virtual hands together for Jono and Yoast.
God, you are trying to outdo yourself every time, aren't you?
Wow, that was phenomenal. Just in the background, I've just seen some incredible comments on the cat and dog stuff. There's a whole bunch of people claiming to be the couch, which I quite liked. But there was also somebody saying that they're feeling like it's passive voice smacking them in the face, which I feel. And there were some good ones saying maybe Google is the kitten hitting our website. So yeah, good work, everybody.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely marvelous work. Okay. Hi everyone, we've got news to go to, so let's get to it.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of news actually this week or this month, because it was Google I/O and there's a lot of stuff coming out already all the time. So hi, let's get going. We've got Google news. Let's start with that. And this is not really news because spam is as old as the internet, or almost as old. I think, yeah, well, that's true too. But internet spam is as old as the internet. So Google detected a lot of spam. Actually, more spam than last time.
Yeah, and they're pretty big numbers. But I think the interesting thing to explore here is maybe not everybody realizes most internet spam is SEO related. It's people trying to build links at scale, low quality links and massive networks of sites and auto-generated content, etc. But the biggest chunk of that is quite often from hacked sites. So people will find their way into networks of sites and hosting companies' backdoors and take over websites and inject links back to their own networks of stuff. And all of these networks connect with these other networks and you end up with millions of pages of spam. So I guess the moral of the story is keep your site safe. Keep your plugins updated, keep your themes updated, follow best practice. Use the site health reports in WordPress, which are really cool. Use good hosting, and generally just kind of make sure that you're not falling prey to that. Google Search Console is quite good at spotting if you've got issues. They'll alert you. Yeah, take care, because you don't want to be one of those pages that Google are just dismissing because they're spam.
Yeah, because at that point you would be thinking,
wow.
And yes, I have a soundboard, and I'm going to play with it. Okay, so and onwards, Google listed a set of best practices for e-commerce video SEO, and this, honestly, is just, in many ways, was just good news. I mean, I think most of it made sense. Was not really news, and either, but they finally said that you need one video per URL.
Yeah, this was nice. There were two really good bits came out of this. One was that they said, if you've got a video, put it on a page and make that the main focus of a page, which makes sense. It's something we've been saying for a while, because if you've got 30 videos on a page, it's all a bit diluted and confusing as a user. But it is okay to have like an overview or an archive of all those videos as well. So good stuff. The other nice thing that came out was they said, if you're using video, especially in e-commerce, think about how people shop and how they research and how they behave. And often video plays a role quite high in the research cycle. So it's when people are starting to explore what their options are and think about potential solutions and competitors. it doesn't make sense just to do videos that try and convince people to buy right at the bottom. You want to be problem solving and comparing and supporting and educating and all those good things, which mean that people remember you and prefer your brand as they go through that journey. So yeah, this is worth reading. There's some really good stuff in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you really are into that stuff, then you should know about this as well. We have a very cool video SEO plugin that, well, you have to pay for, but we have to make some money too. So go check it out if you haven't done that yet.
Yep.
Google Search Console added a new search performance report. It's good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything new here, but it's nice to have all of this in one place. We know that Core Web Vitals is a big deal, that Google are pushing on this speed and performance stuff. And they've said a lot that these sit neatly with things like, is your site an HTTPS, and are you mobile friendly? And do you have, hey, any security issues like my site's been hacked? Having all of this in a single dashboard is really handy at a glance to see what's going on and how am I doing. And obviously any big red numbers should probably prompt some kind of action.
Yeah, big red numbers are never good. Let me resize my screen a bit so we get higher screen resolution. Yeah, cool. Then John Mew shared quite a bit of good advice on how to optimize your images.
Yeah, there was a load of
there was some specific bits in there, right?
Yeah, there was a load of best practice, which I know we've covered on things like use optimal formats and don't forget to shrink them down so they're not 20 megs. But one of the really interesting things that came out is he said, if you're changing your images, say you've got an image of a cat on a product page and you change it to an image of a dog, then why you do that baffles me. Don't forget to redirect the original image, because it might still be in Google Images, which can be a good source of traffic. It might still be linked to, it might still be bookmarked, it might have been useful. You need to redirect your images in the same way that you might redirect your changed pages or your deleted resources, which I know is something that not many people think about. So if your images are an important part of your strategy, it's definitely worth making sure that you're not leaving dead ends as you update things.
Yeah, this was something that made me go, because honestly, WordPress is very, very good at creating new image URLs every other day. If you add a new image size, and suddenly you have a new image URL as well, and if you change an image size, and suddenly all images might be gone, etc. Now, if images no longer exist, it's good to know that you can redirect them with WordPress. In fact, you can redirect them with our premium plugin, because at that point, when the image no longer exists, you can actually redirect as URL as WordPress will pick it up in most cases, unless your hosting is set up to not allow JPEG, PNG, etc. to go to WordPress. But in most cases, that's not the case. So you can just use our premium plugin to redirect those images. And we are thinking about how we can improve that process a bit, because, well, actually, John Mew got us thinking, which is good.
Nice.
He doesn't do that all that much. We love you, John. Don't worry. But there's not a whole lot of the things he says are really news to me. But this was like, oh, shit, I didn't think about this enough. So, yeah, by all means, go do that. And then, yeah, more.
Don't read this. Don't try and read this.
No. What is it? Tell me.
That's a good question. So we did mention GPT-3, I think, a few months ago. This is a fancy new breakthrough in machine learning text analysis and generation. If you want automated content and text, this is the latest cutting edge AI thing that does that. So teams at Google have been looking at this and saying, what if we completely reinvented how Google works? Because when you look at the history of Google, it's all about, they started off crawling the web, they started off measuring links, they developed PageRank, they said, what if we digest all the content on these web pages and we index it and we build a search engine, and it all is all built on consuming this text content? What if you binned all of that and you built something completely different, which just consumed all of that text and used GPT-3 and a whole bunch of fancy AI just to answer searcher questions? You didn't rank websites, you didn't count links, you didn't even send users to web pages. You just solved problems in the search engine. And that really got me thinking. I think that's a really interesting idea, because the entire way that Google works is accidental. It wasn't ever really designed this way. And no part of their ecosystem says we have to rank web pages and send users to websites. So, and the SEO in me really says, okay, I really need to be thinking then, how do I position my brand as a trusted advisor? How do I solve user problems? How do I build a reputation? How do I be memorable? And a lot of that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as how do I rank highly for this keyword, or even how do I get clicks to my page? We must start thinking more about how do I present myself in the search results as part of our strategies. This may go nowhere.
It's not all that different, though. In the end, it's still, how am I the best result for when someone searches for X?
Yep, precisely. So yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is really. Yeah, it's also scary in a way, and I don't necessarily like the way where this all goes. But we'll see. Okay, so that was all the Google news we thought, and then Google I/O happened, and basically when Google I/O happens as an SEO, you're like gearing up because you know that a lot of stuff will be coming out, and honestly, I was a bit underwhelmed in a way. Because some of the stuff that they were showing was really cool, but it was also like, mwah, is that really what you've done this year?
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I saw a write-up saying they have such a broad product offering. You think of all the things that Google does, that actually, if they were a different company, any one of the things they announced would be incredible. But when you look at it through the lens of Google, like, oh yeah, we've rolled out a whole bunch of AI middleware across all these product bundles, and it's quite abstract and it's quite deep. So yeah, it's not exciting, is it?
I was most excited by the Google Meet announcements I saw. But yeah, no. So they've launched Google Mum, a new language model, and I seriously, Google is not good at naming stuff, but this is. Yeah. So Mum's 1,000 times more powerful than BERT.
Yep. Also unhelpful.
This doesn't mean anything to me, and I can understand it if it doesn't mean anything to a whole lot of people, because BERT in itself is already quite a hard and complex thing to grasp. I mean, it was a model of how they understand language, and then they try to understand language more in context of where the words are used, etc. I mean, we have a team of linguists working at Yoast here on this stuff, and they sort of understand BERT. Because of talking to them sometimes and talking to other people, I have a vague understanding of what that means. But what does that times 1,000 mean?
Yeah.
I have no clue.
It's not helpful, is it? I think the important takeaway is, once upon a time, Google just looked at keywords, and then they evolved to look at phrases. And then they evolved to look at context, which is where BERT comes in, that it's not just the words, it's the relationship with the other words and all of that stuff. And now where Mum takes it is in two additional things. One is multimedia. So what's the relationship between the words and the pictures and the video, and how do we understand that? And then also multilingual. How do we do that across all these languages? And they can take all that context and say, okay, you've searched for running shoes. And we don't just try and rank the best page that has those words on it. We really try and comprehend all of the content across all of the languages in all of the formats and find out what the best solution is for you. Which again, it's the same takeaway. You can't just try and rank and compete for that last keyword. You have to solve user problems way up the funnel, help them research, answer their questions, provide advice, provide interesting opinions, and do much more than just put words on a web page. You want to be curating and architecting useful content experiences, which is a big ask, but that's what Google are trying to consume and understand.
Yeah, the whole multilingual aspect of this had me baffled a bit as well, because honestly, in not a whole lot of countries in the world would a result in another language than the language that you're searching in be a good result.
Yeah.
I mean, in the Netherlands, you could probably get away with an English result if someone is searching in Dutch to a certain extent, because most people in the Netherlands do actually speak English. But in most countries in the world, I mean, if we gave Americans Spanish results, the world would just be too small. So I don't see how that really helps. The only thing I do see is that they could maybe auto-translate a whole lot of that stuff in results, etc. And I see that happening. But yeah, all of this seems to be mostly about multimodal, so different ways of doing things and combining all these things together. And I sort of understand why they need it. And I also understand why they need, because they did spend a whole lot of time in the I/O keynote talking about processing power. I understand why you need tons and tons and tons of processing power to use all of this. I'm just looking and waiting for real world applications, I think.
Yeah, and in the announcement blog post, there's a little paragraph at the bottom that essentially says this is a work in progress, and we're currently looking at ways to reduce carbon emissions from the overheads of powering this. This is a trial, and it's not cheap or simple to run. So we'll see where it goes.
Many people in the comments are saying many people in America actually do speak Spanish. I know, but the funny thing is, you know what happens when you present stuff in Spanish to people? A certain group in America can deal with that quite well, and then a large group of people can deal with that not at all. So yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Anyway, Google's shopping graph, they announced this, and I only need to click, I think, on my slide to get this to work. Yeah, there it goes. Also fancy. It's video within video within video. This is all sort of an inception of video. So yeah, Google Shopping Graph. What is it, Jono? Tell us.
That's a good question. So let me start by telling you what Google Knowledge Graph is, which we've talked about before, which is that of all the content that Google consume and encounter, they try and understand what those things are and the relationships between them. And Wikipedia is a huge part of this. Wikidata is a huge part of this. All the proprietary stuff that Google have built helps them to understand that a cat is an animal that is often found in a house that has 4 legs and so on and so forth. And they can use that to influence what ranks and how it looks and how results are localized and 1,000 other things. Product graph is that for products. So all the product info, all the prices, all the availability, all the sales, all of that information across all time for all the retailers and places where you can buy that thing. So they have structured data on all of these attributes, which means they can say, here is the cheapest place to buy this laptop, or this restaurant is 20% more average than the comparable restaurants in the same area. You should wait until Friday when they're on average 30% cheaper. They can start to position themselves as the authority on product availability and information. And I think
before you think that Google is really, really smart in doing this, before you think that, do realize that the only reason that they can build this now is because they've been asking website owners to mark up their products with EINs or ISBNs or the codes that they use to recognize these products across different shops. Yeah. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, in a way, the fact that they call this a graph is like overselling it a bit. Because what they do is they scrape all these websites, then they take the schema that we give them, and then they say, hey, let's combine all of that into a database.
Yep. I think practically speaking, this really means that you need to work out whether you're going to compete on price or differentiation. Because if you're not the cheapest and you're not the best, nobody's going to select you from Google's inventory, because those are the 2 filters that people are going to search on. And there can be 100 places where you can buy the thing. I want the cheapest, or I want the best.
Or the nearest.
Yeah. But you've got to win on one of those factors.
Yeah. Okay. And then they gave merchants more ways to shop. But those merchants have to be on Shopify, don't they?
Yes, apparently so. So this is more Google integration with Shopify, which is pretty awesome. If you are running a Shopify store, you can now automatically just have all of your product inventory show up in Google, which is pretty cool. That said, this isn't. So the integration here is special to Shopify, but this isn't anything that you can't do on other platforms. It's built on Google Merchant Center. It's the same kind of feeds and RSS and XML that you can do yourself. It's worth looking into. But it's pretty neat, I think, that Google are integrating so deeply directly into the platform level. You can just not worry about any of that integration nonsense and get on with selling.
Yeah, this is one of the things where Shopify does make it really attractive to go to a SaaS instead of hosting your own WooCommerce and figuring all this out for yourself. I honestly also think that this is where hosts should step in and do this for you as well. If you're on the WooCommerce side of things, this is where they can help you make this stuff easy. And it's not necessarily. So, yeah. Then news that actually had me excited. Google Page Experience ranking coming to desktop. Finally.
Yes, this is nice. So we've talked about this a lot, the upcoming page experience ranking thing, which was going to be in June and has been pushed back to August. I'm not sure if that's still up to date. And how they're monitoring core web vitals and you need to pass the threshold, etc. All of that, has been mobile centric so far. So all of the documentation has said we're going to measure and monitor and reward this based on your mobile performance, presumably because in most cases that's going to be worse than desktop, and it's really where Google wants to be focusing. However, now they're saying this will also be desktop too, which is great. It does mean you need to double check all of your metrics and make sure that your desktop site is fast as well as your mobile site, and they may be very different depending on how they're built and work. We do have we had a good article recently on Yoast.com by Edwin about mobile parity, talking about how your mobile experience ought to be similar but not necessarily identical to your desktop. The other way around is quite interesting. So maybe go and read that article from the bottom to the top or back to front and apply the same thinking.
Yeah. My suggestion would be to read it on a mobile phone.
Yes, good shout.
Okay, and this was funny. New tools and web stories.
Yeah, I really like web stories. I really like the idea of web stories. We've talked about this before as well. It's essentially Instagram style content, but that you author and host on or in your own website. So you drag and drop images.
No, let me stop you right there.
No.
It's Snapchat style content that has become Instagram style content. That with this becomes Google Web Stories style content. I mean,
there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. It's their slice on what a web story is, and obviously their strategy is that they think that this is the best version of web stories. So these create web pages on your website, or they can be embedded into existing blog posts and web pages. I'm still not entirely sure I understand the real world use cases, but these are so powerful. They look sleek, they're easy to build, they're pretty awesome. They could be part of a really good SEO strategy because they can attract traffic, etc. What's nice is that this new update, which was announced at I/O, brings 360-degree panoramic images, which are pretty cool for look around stuff. Polls and surveys where you can get people to vote on stuff, and a whole bunch of best practice framework for how should you embed these and what's the best approach for understanding how to connect with audiences and stuff. So this is really maturing. I honestly thought when it first came out it was a bit gimmicky, but the more I look at it, the more I think this is a different type of content for a different type of strategy that's really worth looking at.
And it's actually it works very well, and it's WordPress based, and I'm quite proud of what that team is building. It's cool. Okay, so that was our Google I/O news. And if you're thinking, hey, wasn't there anything more? No, that was really it. Or we've missed it, and we'll discuss it next time. As these things go, Google I/O is a lot of video material. I have not viewed all of it yet. And nor has Jono, even though he has more time. Now, we do have something else. We have Microsoft news. And honestly, most of the time when we have Microsoft news, it's not all that interesting. This is no different. So Bing has new shopping features. And honestly, they're slightly better than what Google has launched so far.
Yeah, despite Google having the product graph, this is exactly how I would want to see that manifest.
Yeah, So I'm hoping that in how they build on top of that product graph, they'll actually make it look like Bing's new shopping features, because this actually looks very decent, very useful. It also really does what Jono was just saying. If this were what Google was like when you search for a product, would you ever sell something? Because basically it's a race to the bottom in terms of price. I wouldn't want to sell laptops myself anymore at that point, because you're competing against everyone else, and it's all very hard. So it is what it is, but it looks sleek, and it might actually, especially if you're in the US where these results tend to be best, this might actually be a very good way of doing product research before you buy something. Then we have our other news section, something that we're expanding on a bit in our webinars. We're trying to highlight a bit more news from outside of just what Google does, because Google might do a whole lot of things, but other people do cool stuff too. Pinterest and Shopify integrating more. This sort of makes sense, right? I was just saying, Jono, why doesn't Shopify buy Pinterest? But probably because they're too expensive. But they seem like they work together quite well.
Yeah, I had a look at this, and it's really interesting that so much of the product discovery and validation and transaction process now happens in these kinds of ecosystems. This might be you selling your products in a way that on a platform where you can never influence, that nobody ever visits your website. And I think the good reminder here is that so much more and more of this stuff happens out there, and that your strategy needs to consider that. Whilst it's still very, very important that you own your own equity and have your own website and domain and build up authority over time, you can't just do that. You also need to be competing in 20 other platforms and places. And some of that will be SEO, some of it will be paid social, some of it will just be hearts and minds and branding. But yeah, you can't just operate in a silo and compete directly on keyword rankings, because all these other platforms are engaging your consumers in all these other places.
Yeah. Okay, and then Google announced that they were going to kill the rich snippet validation tool. So schema.org took it up and is now building on top of it. So that means that other Googlers are maintaining this tool than they were done before. But we have validator.schema.org now, and
I'm so happy.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We do so much stuff with schema in the Yoast plugin. We generate it and build it and output it, and we continually run into challenges where there are differences between the schema.org spec and how Google interprets that. And until now, their testing tools have all said, this is wrong, this is wrong. And it's not wrong. It's just not how they want it, or it doesn't meet a specific use case that they want to parse and process. And it's not quite the same thing. Whereas now this version of the schema markup validator is much less opinionated. It just says, is this valid? Is it right? And then there's separate systems like Google's rich results test for saying, okay, are you eligible for shiny results in the search engines? So it's really nice to have separated those concepts. It makes our lives much easier. And it opens up schema.org, I think, to more adoption and more people doing more stuff, because they're not afraid that they're getting these strange errors from Google. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy with that as well. And then we had a report from IRA that I think they do every year, right?
Yeah, I recall us mentioning this some number of episodes ago last time, I think. So this is, ERA is a SEO agency, digital marketing agency in the UK, run by Paddy Mugan, who some of you may recognize his name. Very prominent SEO, literally wrote the book on link building a number of years ago. And we've included this because we don't talk a lot about link building on this podcast, this webinar, even a podcast with video. We'll call it a webinar. Because I'm not a massive link builder. I know that Yoast isn't, but having and getting and managing links can be an important part of an SEO strategy. And it's riddled with complexity. There are do's and don'ts and goods and bads, and it's a big field that we don't touch a lot. Thankfully, if you want to go and explore and learn more, this is a really good report. They do this every year. They interview a whole bunch of SEOs. They look at different aspects of what do you think, what's growing, what's changing, what works, what doesn't, and they show you all the data. They explore it all. They get experts to interrogate it and provide opinions and resources and tools. If you want to learn more about link building, it's a really good place to go in and see what's going on. It does a really good job of debunking legacy bad practices and kind of really framing what you should be doing now moving forward. So definitely worth a read.
Yeah, and now, because this is cool and awesome, I did also want to talk about the other side of this.
Yeah.
Because there was some research by this guy together with the New York Times on link rot. And it's quite scary because they looked at like, hey, we have content online since 1996, and we've been adding links to that content since 1996. How do those links do? And well, it turns out a whole lot of those links no longer work. They are rotted, and that can happen in multiple different ways and multiple different things. Actually, you should look up this thread on Twitter. Maybe Jono can throw the link into the chat.
Dig it out now.
And then yeah, I mean, a whole lot of examples of things that can go wrong. They have some solutions in there that I do not even think are very good ones, but that's because there are no good solutions to this, because pages do go away. And the problem is that we call something permalink. Even in WordPress, we call things a permalink when it's not a permalink. It's not a permalink at all, because if I change my permalink structure, my old permalinks don't work anymore. So, yeah.
Or if your domain expires, or like any other number of scenarios.
So make it redirects. Please audit your own content every once in a while for your outgoing links, and check whether your outgoing links are still going somewhere that you actually intended them to go to. And, yeah, have a look at this. Link rot is a real problem on the web. And as the web gets bigger and as the web gets older, this problem is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep.
With that, WordPress news. If I go to the right slide. Yeah, there we go. I promised in chat already that I would talk about image formats, because someone was asking like, hey, JPEG, PNG, like John Mueller was talking about that. What should I use? Well, if you have the choice, then probably WebP is the best format in many, many cases. And WordPress has actually landed WebP support. I think we talked about this last time that we wanted WebP support. Now I have one request left. I want SVG support as well. So yeah. Play with this. The next core version of WordPress will support WebP. I think that's a great enhancement.
Yep.
Yeah, it is what it is. And then we have this. Can you explain this, Jono? Because, well, I can try, but it's hard.
I'll give it a shot. You're writing an awesome blog post and you think this needs a big image. So you go to Google and you search cat and you pick the first awesome cat image you find out of Google Images, except, turns out that image has a license and it's owned by the photographer who took it or the site which sells it. And now you are being illegal. That's bad. This happens all the time. There are solutions. There are repositories of free images and images that you can use. If you cite the author, you'll see quite commonly images will say, thanks to Jono Alderson, with a link underneath. There are different types of that licensing and different legal frameworks around it. It is incredibly difficult and complex to dig into all the different variants. Like, you can use this image and you can crop it, but you can't rotate it as long as you cite me. And there are all sorts of variants of these rules, and you've got to get it right. Otherwise, people get very, very angry. This is a real problem in WordPress land because there's lots of people publishing posts and putting images in, and they don't necessarily think about this. So, Automatic, which is the company run by Matt Mullenweg, who started WordPress, which is deeply entwined with the WordPress ecosystem, bought, what's it called? What's the thing called?
It's the Creative Commons image search or something like that. Yeah. And so they bought that part out of Creative Commons and donated it to the WordPress project, as well as the team that works on it. And yeah.
So now there will be in WordPress eventually like an automatic free image search thing where you can manage all that licensing, and maybe some of it will happen automatically in the background, and you can just say, only show me images I'm allowed to use for free, etc., etc. Really nice. Now, the bigger thing that's happening as part of this is, having brought this new thing into WordPress, has created what they're calling the Openverse, which is WordPress plus image search plus presumably other things as we go along, which will all aim to bundle together open source platforms and projects that make it easier to publish content and to democratize publishing, as is the ethos of WordPress. So it's a nice new toy. It should be quite impactful. It'll certainly make day-to-day publishing easier and managing images better, and mean that we all stop stealing images.
Yeah,
good stuff.
I like it. Yeah, it's a great enhancement to the ecosystem, I think. Okay, that was our WordPress news, and then we have some Yoast news for as far as it is different from WordPress news. We landed Yoast SEO 16.3 since last month, which had a very cool new feature, which Jono came up with and I coded and then the team tested, which allows you to go, if you have Yoast SEO Premium, to go into your profile and expand your schema by quite a bit. Yeah, this can be useful, especially if you have a knowledge graph showing up for your name. Some of this stuff is actually literally taken out of there and used in that knowledge graph, like your gender, your birth date, stuff like that. It's really cool stuff. We also released a new version of our WooCommerce SEO plugin with this awesome, and I really, really like this myself, product preview, snippet preview. So this is the first time that we've done our snippet preview and made it rich. So this is this will take all the data from your product page, price, availability, rating, etc., and give you a nice preview of that in the snippet preview. Yeah. We like it. Yep, if you think, hey, I have WooCommerce SEO, or I have WooCommerce and I have Yoast SEO, but I don't have this, then you might be right, and you might be missing our WooCommerce SEO plugin, which powers all of this. This is where you can go and get that. So far for the ad. And then we've been celebrating 5 years of our readability analysis. We've been, doing a bit of beating our own chest in a way in looking back and realizing, hey, 5 years ago, nobody in the SEO space was talking about readability. And now all of these SEO tools measure readability. And I credit us for doing that. And I actually credit my wife for coming up with the fact that this should be something that we should be doing. And then I credit Irene and the rest of our linguists for building all of this awesome stuff, because it is awesome. We have a lot of content around this recently. So why readability is important, why it's important that you write stuff that actually is readable. If you are working hard to reach a larger audience, then one of the ways of reaching a larger audience is actually using a language that more people understand. It's not about dumbing down, it's about opening up your content. With that, I have done a couple of podcasts with our mutual friend Chris Jones, a long time friend of mine. I actually found a photo of Chris and myself from 2008 at SES New York, where we were talking SEO. It was good to hang out with him. I think it was a good show. Then an even better show with a remarkable person, also called us my wife and my boss, and she's awesome, Marika, our CEO. And the third, and that's coming up tomorrow, is an episode with Nichola Stott, another mutual friend of me and Jono's. She's an agency owner from the UK. And we've actually done an hour-long show or 3/4 of an hour on when you should hire an SEO agency, how you should think about that, what happens, what's important in the process, etc. If you are thinking about hiring an SEO agency, I think this is a must listen. With that, I have something else that I want to talk about. We want to talk about our Yoast Diversity Fund. And to talk about diversity, I'm going to bring in another white male, because that's what we do. So yeah, Taco, this is your thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. So ever since it started, I've been involved with the Diversity Fund, and we used to use that to sponsor people to overcome let's just put it out there very blunt, the white male lineups at tech conferences. Yeah, I know the three of us aren't setting the right example here, but hey,
that's what this sets out to solve, right? This is the problem we're trying to solve.
Absolutely. Yes. So the thing is, we sponsored people to go to conferences, and we would take away the financial barrier that would prevent them to, if they were adding diversity to that lineup. So we were diversifying speaker lineups. The problem is, since this pandemic thingy, there are not very many in-person conferences. The good thing about it is that all the online conferences are so much more accessible now to everyone. So there's a lot less of a financial barrier to attend and to speak at conferences. But we still want to increase the diversity of WordPress. So we came up with a repurposed version of our diversity fund. So if you have a project that you want to work on in WordPress, and you are part of a typically underrepresented group in tech, then please, please, please go to our diversity fund page. And I can talk and chat at the same time, but I'll put the link in the chat unless Jono or Joost beats me to it. And apply for the diversity fund. You have a few days left, but we cannot stress enough, if you are part of an underrepresented group and you want to work on WordPress, and we can take away financial barriers that will help you do so, please, please, please do apply. And if you're now feeling, hey, I'm not part of an underrepresented group, but I would really like to do a project that targets an underrepresented group, then also do apply, because all the help that we can get to diversify WordPress is worth it. So please, please, please share the link, apply, make some noise, because there's about 5 days left to apply.
Yeah. Thanks, Taco. We can't stress enough how important this is to us. For those of you that don't understand it, I don't make jokes about diversity other than when I can joke about the three of us being white males. Yeah, thank you, Taco. And with that, I am through most of our stuff, and I want to invite you to make sure that you join us for the next SEO News webinar, which is going to be on June 29th. And I look forward to that already. With that, we're going to go in some questions, because we seem to have had a few.
Yes, absolutely. By the way, if people want to register for the next webinar, there's a button at the bottom of your screen. It just appeared. It's sort of a blinky effect thingy, so it should be easy to find. Click it and sign up for the next one. While you do that, we have almost 20 questions lined up. If yours isn't in the lineup yet, then now would be the right time to head over to the Ask a Question section and add your questions. And if there's a specific one that you really want to see answered, make sure that you upvote your favorite question. So the first one was asked early in our webinar. So we briefly already talked about different image formats. But I think there's a few more things you can add here. So are there any SEO advantages to using WebP images over PNG or JPEG, other than the obvious website load speed improvement?
I'm racking my brains and I can't think of anything. Though related, it's not always going to be better to use WebP. Sometimes a PNG might be faster, or even a JPEG. Check out Squoosh.app that I linked to earlier for playing with the best format. I don't think there's anything out like it's WebP supported in everything now. All the tools expect and use it. I don't think there's any inherent advantage other than it being 1,000 times faster.
Yeah, which should be enough to get to it.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is changing or optimizing file names worth it as far as SEO goes?
I wouldn't bother if you've already created the images and they already exist, not least of which because you'll need to create the redirects. But moving forwards, definitely make it part of your workflow. I'm reasonably sure, Yoast, that your blog post about image optimization says that you should name them sensibly.
Yeah. You do need to name them sensibly and fix that. I wish WordPress made that a bit easier in many ways. It doesn't. So you need to do that before you upload them. I have many thoughts on how we could improve this process in WordPress, but honestly, that's going to be non-trivial because a whole lot of this stuff in WordPress is old, really old, and WordPress doesn't know a lot of the relations with images and your content. So if you use an image twice in 2 different posts, and WordPress only knows about one of them, so there's a whole lot of problems there that we are intending to solve with Yoast SEO, but we've in a way only just started to do that. So we have a table now in Yoast SEO that we create where we know which images are in which posts, so we can do fun stuff with that. I already saw the suggestion like, hey, are you going to create redirects automatically when you delete an image, things like that. I have a lot of thoughts. A lot of these things I want to build. Unfortunately, I don't have unended resources in development. So
oh, but if you are
this is the job ad. Yes.
Yeah. Get in touch.
So yeah, we are hiring. Also, we opened up remote hiring. So if you're a developer and you're working in a time zone that's relatively close to ours in Europe, then we would love to talk to you if you want to talk to us. And yeah, that's it. I see a good question by my good friend Anne Donnelly. Hi, Anne. It's good to see you again. Who's asking whether we need to do anything different for Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri, etc. Well, yes, but probably also all different things for all 3 of them, which is where sort of the trouble starts, which is why we are such big proponents of schema.org, because we would like to standardize some of this stuff, because otherwise we'll all go nuts. We have so right now, if you look at the ecosystem and how it works, you have Facebook metadata that is being read by Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and well, a lot of other sites. Then you have Twitter specific metadata. Then you have old Twitter specific metadata that Slack reads. So there's all these different things that that are out there, and we would like to slowly replace all of them with schema. So structured data and schema will be the replacement or the thing for all of that, I think. And you're already seeing some of that. A lot of that structured data is already being used to enhance these experiences, because for recipes, etc., you can already see what Google does with that in Google Assistant, and it's actually quite cool.
Is that a topic that we should talk about more, voice search and voice SEO?
I don't think so.
It's all that different.
Yeah, it's just a different interface. And maybe you ought to be looking to provide snappier, shorter bullet point content, but you should be doing that anyway.
All right. And then we get to our monthly question now. Since you ever touched on this, Joost, is there any news on the Yoast Divi integration?
This is why I normally don't do product announcements, because you end up saying we're working on something and then people will ask you about it, and then you have to say, yeah, we're working on it.
So it's still in the works. We haven't forgotten about it.
No, absolutely not. I will say that it's interesting to see the trends in the page builder ecosystem. I should probably do a post on that at some point in the near future, because what we track a lot of data, of course, on our users, and we see that Divi is actually rather stable. Elementor is growing like crazy, and some of the others are shrinking, which is in a way good news. Classic Editor is shrinking in usage too, which is good to see. So there's a lot happening in that space.
All right. So a question just popped up at the top because it got more votes. To the best of your knowledge, are other non-Google search engines also using schema?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yandex was one of the biggest users of schema right from the start. Bing uses it extensively.
Microsoft does a ton behind the scenes behind Bing, and like all the Google, all the Windows Cortana stuff, loads and loads of stuff.
Yeah, honestly, everyone who's going to build a search engine right now is going to use it because it's the cheapest way for search engines to build a search engine.
So it's not just Google. You optimize for all at once when you're using schema.
Yeah,
I think that's absolutely good to know. The next question is quite a long one. Jason says, I'm with a TV network. We do a lot of video that doesn't have a lot of text behind it. Since the description is typically pretty short, I don't have an opportunity to do a lot of keywords in the text. What do you recommend I do to get a greater presence?
I think he also asked about JW Player. I think we only removed that recently, Jason, to be honest, because nobody's using that anymore, it seems.
It's a bit old school, isn't it, as a piece of tech?
Yeah, which is in a way sad, because JW Player was very Dutch as well. Honestly, what I would do, if you have subtitles or transcripts, I would add those and make those accessible, and that would probably open up like all of the content in that show a bit better.
And transcripts you can do cheaply and effectively. There are lots of third-party services that will do it per minute, per word, per whatever, that are not expensive and should be ROI positive if they're good videos.
Yeah, and if you want to prove that, you could even be as sneaky as uploading it to YouTube, grab the automatically created transcripts, and then load those back into your player.
I see Jason just said in the chat, we add the captions into
so what you'd need to do at that point is add the captions to your schema, so that it can actually be picked up as being that. That might take a bit of coding, but it should be relatively simple. And if you're building a JW player, then it's probably doable. Look at developer.yoast.com for our schema API. And if you can't figure it out, send me a tweet.
That would be at JDeValk on Twitter. All right, so we've been talking about Core Web Vitals a lot the past months, and we've always said they would be here in May. Did that happen? Because Cedric is asking, are they pushed to October?
End of August, last thing I heard, and that may change again. And actually, this is quite topical right now. There's a lot of very confused messaging coming out of Google. I think yesterday, today, lots of stuff on Twitter where on one hand they're saying and reiterating, don't panic about this. It's not going to be a huge ranking factor. It's only a tiebreaker. But then literally in the same conversation, they go on to say, actually, this might really affect some sites quite a lot. I would ignore all the hyperbole and confusion and just remember that speed and performance is the same thing as user experience, and that good user experience is good rankings, is good conversion, is good money, is all the good things. And don't judge how much you invest on this based on how much of a ranking factor we think it might be. Do it because it's the right thing to be doing.
I like the next question, honestly, if we're going to take the top one, Taco. Anders asks on elaborating on the iOS 14.5 privacy stuff related to the efficiency of Yoast SEO. Well, funnily enough, because Yoast SEO optimizes for organic search, we don't have anything to do with retargeting. And actually, I think we like privacy even more than Apple does. So it doesn't affect us, and it doesn't affect SEO. In fact, because of these changes in iOS, I think a lot of the other methods of marketing that have become so prevalent over the last few years, of retargeting and all these other things, will become harder and will become less effective. And with that, SEO becomes even more of a great marketing channel. And the only thing that you might get because of that is a bit more competition. But honestly, it doesn't affect SEO. And SEO has always been demand-driven instead of push, like a lot of those marketing methods are. And it's why I love SEO. I mean, I'm a marketer. That's my background. I also develop, but I am a digital marketer at heart. And I just don't like the pushy stuff. I like the demand-driven stuff, the stuff where people search for something and you give it to them. and you make sure that you were a good result for that search. That's what SEO is. That's not going anywhere, and it'll keep on working.
All right. So since we are almost out of time, there is one question that there are two questions that I really, really, really want you to take a look at. And the first one is by Bas, and he asks, having a site targeted for Holland, should I anyway write title and description in English, or should I keep it in Dutch?
Honestly, if you can't do both, then I would do Dutch. But I would suggest doing both, because there's quite a few people in the Netherlands that that don't have Dutch as a first language. In fact, there are more people that have English as a second language in the Netherlands than there are in the UK. So, yeah, that's what I'd say. I would go for both if possible, if you can't go for Dutch.
And both would mean that you create a multilingual website,
Yes.
which is hard.
Slightly, yes.
If you haven't done that before, I know there's a course about it.
Yeah, so multilingual SEO is something that we have courses about and things about. It's not easy. I'm not going to lie. But multilingual for two languages is doable. It could also be just two sites.
And that's a good rule
Multilingual
of thumb.
for more than two is painful.
Yeah, if the product is the same and the audience is essentially the same other than living somewhere else, then one multilingual site. If it's distinctly different in those territories, then two sites, but obviously there's one country. So yeah, one multilingual site.
All right. And then I promised you a last question, and I know you've been scrolling through the questions to find which one I'm talking about. It's not there. It's a question that I have for you. Because we are at the end of May, and that means that there's just a few more days to apply for the Yoast Diversity Fund. What project would you love to see submitted for the fund? What would you love fixed in WordPress? Let's make it easier.
Well, I'd like to fix multilingual in WordPress. So if someone's up for that, hell yeah.
Sounds good.
So multilingual in WordPress is harder than it should be. So that is probably the thing that I would talk about. And there's quite a few things. There's loads of good stuff that should be fixed in WordPress or around WordPress. I think actually Openverse, which we talked about earlier, also opens up a whole category of new fun stuff that we can do. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we can do there.
All right, and I see that Jono's audio broke. So
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Oh,
sorry. Whew.
Thank you. Yeah, we're also up to the full hour. So do you have a quick answer, Jono, or should we get people to sign up for next month's webinar?
I missed half the question, so let's quietly edge away and get people on for next time. I'll have an answer.
All right. Yes. All right. So next month, the 29th of June, we'll be back with another SEO news webinar. Click the button below. There's a perfect call to action, the green button that's been flashing for the past 20 minutes. Click it and we'll see you again next month.
Good work, people.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.